Hello! I've been using this, which is Cotman Sketches Pocket Box, for quite some time now. It's my first real introduction to watercolor, and I thought I'd share some of my experience using this. So this is a set of 12 half pans. As you can see, I have used it quite a bit, and you also have 3 different mixing areas included. It comes with a travel brush, and one change that I have made to this is I have replaced the Chinese white that comes with this set with Payne's Grey, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. But just in general, this is a good size for the palette. It's nice to use for traveling. It's not going to take up a lot of space in your bag, and I found that these colors are very good for mixing. I do have some things about the mixing areas I don't like, and the first is it doesn't fold back completely. And if we look at this area, you can see that it's a very tiny edge. It's only this short edge holding the water in place. So if it's leaning forward and this is the tiny edge holding the water in place, you can imagine it would be quite easy to accidentally dump out the water you have in there. It hasn't happened, but I mean it's bound to happen. Since I'm using these at home, I tend not to use these mixing areas. The leftover paint here is from when I did travel with these. And this little channel is to hold your travel brush, so that's quite convenient. And as long as it's small enough, you can replace the brush or pop something else in there. But that's a tiny bit of storage. So let's look at the colors that are included in this set. So these are the original 12. So you have lemon yellow hue, cadmium yellow hue, cadmium red pale hue, alizarin crimson hue, ultramarine, cerulean blue hue, viridian hue, sap green, yellow ochre, burnt sienna, burnt umber, and Chinese white. If you're new to watercolor and pigments and such, and wondering about the different hues, why they're called hue, it's because these are not actually containing the pigment they say that they are containing. So for example, cadmium yellow hue, it looks like cadmium yellow, but it isn't actually cadmium yellow, because cadmium is a heavy metal. Although you can still find watercolor with actual cadmium in it, this is made to look like cadmium without the potential danger of using cadmium. So these are basically safe paints. I'm not saying they are completely non-toxic, you shouldn't eat them and so on, but they are safer than using actual cadmium, for example. I have also written down some information about each of these. So all colors except cerulean blue, Chinese white, burnt umber, and yellow ochre are transparent. So these 4 colors are instead opaque. As you can see, for example, here I added a black line before I painted the white. Watercolors are always transparent. If you want opaque watercolors, you use gouache instead. So what this means is just that they are more opaque than the other ones. But these are the colors that are included. So what you have is you have a greenish yellow, a reddish yellow, a yellowish red, a bluish red, reddish blue, a yellowish blue, a bluish green, a yellowish green, and then you have 3 earth colors and white. So these are very good mixing colors, and I have been able to mix a lot of colors from these. I rarely use colors straight out of the pan, I always mix my own. I did say that I have made one change, and this is just personal preference. I don't use white in my watercolor. So what I did was I replaced my Chinese white with Payne's Grey. So as you can see, this original palette doesn't include any black, and my palette still doesn't include black. And if you're new to watercolor, usually what you do to create your own dark color is that you mix ultramarine and burnt umber, and that creates basically a Payne's Grey. This is a bit more neutral, more of a pure grey tone than what you would get for mixing ultramarine and burnt umber. But I still, if I want to adjust this tone a bit, I would add a bit of blue, or I would add a bit of brown if I want to make it warmer. So I'm not always using this as is, but this is more of a convenience color for me. So I use a lot of Payne's Grey. So I used to mix a lot of my own Payne's Grey, and that is why I have used up almost all of my ultramarine. I have a new pan to replace this one later, but adding the Payne's Grey means that I don't have to use my ultramarine as much. And also it cuts down on mixing time. So I added Payne's Grey to mine, and if you ask me, this is a better starting set for watercolor because, as I said, I'm team no white in watercolor. If I want to add white details, I would instead add a bit of gouache or maybe an acrylic marker on top. But that's just my personal preference. If you prefer using white, then by all means keep using white. There are no rules, it's just my personal preference to not use it. So these are the colors. I also looked at light fastness information, and it was a bit confusing on Winsor Newton's website because they had one column for permanence and one column for light fastness code. All these colors are permanent. The earth colors are extremely permanent, and the white is also extremely permanent. However, not all of them did have a light fastness code. So we have light fastness code for the alizarin crimson, ultramarine, cerulean blue, viridian hue, and then the earth colors white and Payne's Grey. The other ones have no light fastness code. If you don't know what light fastness is, it's basically how quickly the pigment fades when it is exposed to light. And that's very important if you're going to be selling your artwork or you want to frame it in your own home, for example. If it's only in a sketchbook, the book being closed means it's going to protect it from light, and it's, even if it's a fugitive, which means that it's fading very quickly, even then it would last quite long just because the book is keeping it protected. You can also store your paintings in a dark drawer, for example, if you want to. Generally, I'm really happy with the colors included in this one. I find that I don't use the viridian hue that much. I find it a bit too blue for my taste. I'm not too keen on the cerulean blue as well. I think the opaqueness has something to do with it. I would probably have preferred a similar color but more transparent. But in general, I really like this set. I don't remember when I bought it, but it wasn't until this year basically that I started using it a lot more. And I'm gonna show you some of the things I made with it so you can see what the possibilities are. I have made more than what's in this book, but I'm gonna show you what's in my current sketchbook that I'm working on at the moment. So for example, I have made some landscapes. I should say I have mostly painted landscapes. I'm trying to learn how to use watercolor and how to use them loosely to get the effect I want. I'm not gonna show you every page, but I'm gonna show you some of my favorite pages. And then we can end with my two swans. I think this is my favorite page in this entire sketchbook so far. One limitation with this set is that you can't mix a good purple. So this is an example where I mixed my own purple. This is only one layer of pigment, I should say. You can get a deeper color, but it's going to be this color nonetheless. But I have also bought dioxazine purple that I added to my palette. Well, not to my actual palette, but I sometimes use it when I paint. And here you can see the difference when you add an actual purple. It's a lot more vibrant. It's a very rich purple. It's beautiful color. For some, this is more of a color palette that they would like, very vibrant color, but for others, they prefer these more muted colors. So if you need to add more colors, it's going to depend on what you prefer to create. As I mentioned, this set also includes a brush. It's very small, however. I have had some issues with it seems I needed to break it in, and now I can get it to stick on. But it is a very short brush, but basically you can reverse the lid and make the handle longer. And now it's difficult to break apart instead. So I'm not too keen on the design of this bit because I've had some issues just getting it to... See, now it popped on completely. This is very inconsistent. It's not a nice fit. They need to... It requires some violence. I'm not a fan of this brush. Also, the actual brush is much too small for my liking. So this would be good for smaller details or a tiny illustration. But the pages I showed you before, I have painted using a brush of this size instead. So you can see there's quite a huge difference. So just imagine how much more work it would be to use this tiny brush that can hardly hold any water compared to this much larger brush. So since there's still quite a lot of room left in here, I would have preferred if they added a bigger brush and also a better brush. In my opinion, either make a good brush or leave it out. Some people maybe like this brush. I really do not, and I don't think I'll ever use it. I don't think I've used it for a full illustration ever. So the price of this is about 20 odd euros where I live. It's going to differ across the world, of course, but I would say that you do get your money's worth. So I have used this for several years, but as I said, I mostly used it this year. So you can fill a lot of pages with the paint included in these. You can also replace the pans when you run out of a color. So you can either buy them as a new pan and then you just remove the pan you have emptied and then pop the new one in. I didn't need any glue for adding my paint spray, so that was very easy. You can also buy these colors in tube and then you can add the tubed color and let it dry and then fill your pan that way. So I would say it is good value. It is a very good starting kit. I have learned a lot about watercolor using these. I really like them. The reason I am looking at more professional watercolors now is that I want to have colors that are a bit more pigmented. I also am curious just to try tubed watercolors and see if I find there's a difference and just learn more basically. So I would 100% recommend. I do wish they replaced the white with Payne's grey. Even if there are some that would use white, I think everybody would benefit from using Payne's grey. So it's better to have the color that more people are going to use. And as I said, I also wish that they would replace the brush. For these mixing areas, I also wish that this would open exactly 180 degrees, so that would lay completely flat, because now they are leaning down and you can also see how the pigment has dried along the edges. To partly combat the fact that these are always leaning, I did use the trick of brushing on some toothpaste to these mixing areas. That creates a rougher surface, which means that the water isn't pooling at the bottom. Instead it's staying spread out across the mixing area. So that is a tip for you if you get this, or if you have problem with other plastic palettes where you will get a pool of water instead of it spreading across the entire area. You can create a better texture by using a bit of toothpaste and a soft brush and brushing it on, leave it for a bit and then rinse it off. But yeah, I really like this palette. I would recommend it and I would buy it again. I hope you found this useful and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!